1.3 million Americans serve today in the armed forces, and 6% of those forces identify as LGBT. Identify. Most were not allowed to identify for much of their history. I was part of that history under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And we're about to hear from some exceptional veterans who served to protect our rights, even during times when their country wasn't doing its part to protect theirs. They could not serve openly. For service members, raising your right hand declares your willingness to put yourself in harm's way. For the LGBT service member, raising your right hand comes with additional dangers. That being who we are, even in today's world, much less the world of our past, is not always safe. William Shedd, the American theologian, once said, "A ship is safe in harbor, but that's not what ships are for." All of us who have served and continue to serve have chosen to leave safe harbor because simply it's who we are. It's what we do. It's in our DNA. I'm privileged to be here today to welcome our storytellers who left safe harbor in perilous times. I'm inspired by your example, grateful for your courage, and excited to hear your stories.
I was a navigator in the 8th Air Force stationed in England during World War II and flew bombing missions over Germany. And how I became a flyer, it was on the rebound from a love affair I had with a master sergeant in my barracks. I enlisted in the Air Force because I didn't want to be drafted as a foot soldier. So I went through basic training, and they sent me to a clerk typist school in Colorado. After which I was assigned to the headquarters in Tinker Field outside Oklahoma City. And I was living in the barracks, and at the end of the barracks were the rooms for the non-commissioned officers. And I did spot Master Sergeant Glenn Cowden, but I didn't know him. That was something beyond me. We used to go into Oklahoma City on the weekends and were driven in trucks with canvas-covered, I guess they were troop carriers, something like that. They drove us in, and you had to catch the last one back about 11 o'clock. So, of course, we all stayed away as long as we could, drinking 3.2 beer because Oklahoma was a dry state. And with everybody else, I raced back to the trucks to get back to the base on time. And we piled into the backs of the trucks and just piled in. And it was dark, there were no lights. And I found myself sitting on the lap of Master Sergeant Glenn Cowden. And amazingly, we were snuggling and sort of smooching in the darkness. Of course, all the men were all piled up around us, so nobody paid any attention. And it kind of cemented it began a love affair. And the next time we went to Oklahoma City, we rented a room in a hotel, and that was our honeymoon. The odd thing about it was, the amazing thing was that he moved me into his room, and I was only a corporal and not entitled to be in one of the big shots' rooms. And right openly, and I don't understand how it really wasn't noticed. The Army was very strict about you couldn't be caught doing it. You got court-martialed if you got caught. And there we were, having an affair openly in the barracks. in his room. He used to invite all his, I used to go working in the headquarters as a clerk every day, and he went he was in the Justice Department. I don't know what it was called, but he memorized all of the Army regulations and went around the country with colonels, big shots. He used to have bull sessions in his room with all of the sergeants used to come in, and they used to tie trout flies. He was a Southern boy who liked trout fishing, and he also used to joust with his buddies in some Southern. It was a Southern practice of word play. You used to say, "You're so low you could crawl under the belly of a flea," and then the other guy would have to outdo him. It was sort of thing that they did. And but one day in the bull session, I don't know why, I didn't even think why, I can imagine now why, but he twisted my arm in front of everybody. He grabbed me and twisted my arm behind my back, painfully. And it was a terrible shock. I had grown up, my parents were immigrant Jews from Eastern Europe, and we lived in a WASP town that hated us, despised us. And every day going to and from school, I used to be beaten up by the boys who were all bigger than me. I was a little thing. And they used to also twist my arm behind my back. So when Master Sergeant Glenn Cowden did it to me, I realized it ended between us instantly. I felt nothing more for him. But I didn't know how to get away. I was living in his room. I couldn't move back into the barracks because I couldn't explain it to anybody. But that day, in my office at my desk, I got a leaflet that said, "Aviation cadets wanted," because so many planes had been shot down over Europe, they were short of aviation personnel. And I wasn't eligible to be a cadet before because I didn't have a college degree. Suddenly, I was eligible. They had dropped the qualification. And I went through aviation. I got away and went through aviation cadets. It's how I got away from Master Sergeant Glenn Cowden, and became a navigator because I was good at math. They made me a navigator. And I was shipped overseas and flew 27 missions with my bomb group, and saw all kinds of gay activity that I didn't know anything about before. One of the key experiences in discovering the gay world, I had plenty of sex when I was a kid because all you had to do was hitchhike, and a man would stop and pick you up, and you had sex in the car. So I was really quite experienced about sex, but I didn't know that there was a gay world. And so I had lots of experiences in the Army discovering what the gay world was about. And in the big illumination happened when I went into a restaurant in Marseille, and it was full of men who all turned their heads when I came into the room in my officer's uniform and my silver wings. And I knew at that moment there was a gay world.
I went into service in 1950. Now, during my little childhood, I was, born up as a Christian. My mother and father were both Christian. So I didn't know anything about homosexuality. I really didn't. And they kept such close ties on us that I thought when I was in school, that if you kissed a girl on the forehead or the cheek, she could get pregnant. And that would be my responsibility. So that's the kind of childhood that I had. So I only had my experiences. I knew we had gay guys. We called them little like sissy boys or girly boys. And they were part of the black culture in my time. They weren't hated. They were just different. But they were self-sufficient. They had their own businesses, beauticians. My mother was a beautician. She used to use one little sissy boy to shampoo for her on Saturday. So they weren't hated. They were in church with us. They sang on the choir. They were ushers. So that's nothing new to me about gay men. But I went into service in 1950 after graduating from high school. And that was quite a trip for me. I'd never been away from home. I didn't know what I was letting myself into. And people say, well, why did you enlist in the service? And I said, well, I wanted to kind of get away from home. I just wanted to be on my own. I wanted to do what I wanted to do, when I wanted to do it, and what I wanted. And I did that. And that was an experience, I'm telling you. And when I went in, so I never came in contact with my cousins. That's what we had a nickname for white folks. They were our cousins until I went into the service, because our neighborhoods were segregated at that time. So that was quite an experience as well. But when I went in, it was segregated. So I was still with my own people. But I learned a lot. I think the military made me a better person than I would have been had I not gone. We had rigid training because we had to show our cousins that we were as good as they were, if not better. So that if we couldn't just have normal training. So if they were going to do 20-mile force march, we had to do 40. So we had the 20-mile force march, and then we had the force march with the sand in the backpack, which made it heavier. We did 35 with the sand in the backpack to make it heavier. So, I'm telling you, it gets heavy. But then our sergeants were when we do like half of that 35 march, they would pour the canteens of water into the sand. And we had to keep on marching. That to make us better, stronger, and everything. In other words, we showing the cousins we could do it too. So I enjoyed that. And I realized I was growing up and I was becoming mature. But I never heard so much cursing as our sergeants cursed us. They cursed so much, they cursed in between words. Every goddamn dent, you all don't understand what I'm talking about. I mean, that was new to me. And I've never been cursed that lightly before. But I think their purpose was very good. We got to prove people wrong that didn't think we could do anything. And I think that made you grow up. It caused us to be team players. Like I knew nothing about a weapon. Didn't know nothing about the M1 weapon. I knew I couldn't hold it up. It weighed 9 pounds. I only weighed 110. So we had to learn to break the weapon down, clean it, keep it clean. But they kept telling us that your platoon is like a chain. And a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Your job is to make sure you're not that weak link. So that means, all my platoon members knew that I didn't know anything about the weapon. But about 4 of us, I felt good. So they had to teach us 4 about it. We had to break it down, put it back together, break it down, and put it back together. Because we were the weak link. And the platoon was responsible for us not being that weak link. So we did it, and it took about a week for us to get it. So then when we learned to do that, then we said, here's where you're going to be stronger and more efficient than your cousins. You're going to do it blindfolded. So we had to learn to do it blindfolded. But I found it interesting, and I learned. I really learned. I don't know how I learned it, but I learned because they couldn't get mad with me after a while. So we did that, and then when we shined shoes, we didn't shine just the top of our shoes. We had to shine the soles as well to prove, again, proving that you're better. And I liked that too. So then came integration. Well, that was interesting. We we fall out in platoons, and these 2.5-ton trucks come with all our cousins in it. So oh, okay. Then the following, Private so-and-so, front and center, Private so-and-so, and we had to get on the 2.5 chunks. Where are we going? They were integrating. Those white guys were being signed to us, and half of us were going to that. And that's how we integrated the military. And it was really nice. So, we still kind of kept to ourselves. Our cousins had their little group, and they sit at the table in the mess hall. We had our, but the training, and I think this is very interesting, the training made us get along. The more you learn about other people, the less you resent them. And I thought it was very nice. But we had one little incident that was kind of sad, because we had this little boy from Tennessee. He had never been away from home like me. Never heard anything but nigger for black people. So he said, well, I want you all to know I like niggers. So it got so quiet. you could really hear rat pissing on cotton at that time. And he said, well, what's going on? I like niggers. I'm trying to tell you. So one of the guys got so mad, he just jumped up and punched him. And we said to him, man, hold on, come on. That's the only word he knows. And it's not his fault. He hadn't been among us like I hadn't been among my cousins until I went in the service. So you develop those funnies. But he turned out to be, he never used that word again. I told him, erase that word. Erase that from your vocabulary. I said, there's no niggas here. There's no rednecks here. There's no spics here. There's no Muslims. We are all military. We're army men. And you're going to have to learn that or you're going to really be hurt. So we did that. And so when we got to a basic training, I went to a leadership school. And I had to learn to be my platoon sergeant. And you may not know this, but my platoon sergeant was really a drag queen. And I was surprised. I mean, I didn't know they had him in the service. He would come at us and say, okay, girls, make mother look good this morning. And we had better make mother look good. You didn't want to make mom mad, So we did that. But to make long story short, and I got out of leadership school. Then I was acting platoon sergeant. They used to call us Hollywood corporals because we were, just and didn't get paid for it or anything. But we wore our little green patches and all this, and that made me feel good. So before I graduated for basic training, though, I got to tell you one thing: how rigid our training was. They were teaching us the rifle, and they talk about the rifle. If you put it in your shoulder, it will kick you. Cause me now, I never heard of a rifle kicking anybody. Now I knew when that sergeant looked at me, and he knew what I said, because he could tell by the expression on my face. When he didn't say anything to me, I knew I was in trouble. What he was doing, he was waiting to get me on the rifle range. He waited, and I know. About a week later, we was on the rifle range. Everybody's prone position, put the rifle in your shoulder. And ready on the left, ready on the right. Commence firing. But when I pulled that trigger, that weapon, boom! I put that weapon down. I was ready to get up. He said, keep firing, soldier. He put his foot in my back and made me empty that clip. When I got up, my lip was swollen, tooth hanging down. He said, now get your ass to the dispensary. But see, today they would get court-martialed for that. But that was the kind of training we went to. And it served its purpose. And then when we integrated, it proved a point, because our cousins didn't believe we were shining our shoes and putting fire to them to burn the wax to the leather to make them shine that much more. And so they started doing it too. And then we started eating together, and so then everything was nice. Well, then I went overseas. Well, the first time overseas, out of the country, went to Germany. First, they weren't sending blacks to Germany. I was one of the first. A whole bunch of us went. And we had a little friction there too because they had told, about us. It wasn't nice. So we had a little racially. But even that, because the German women didn't know what to do, some of them liked us. So we was at a dance one time and we heard all this ruckus in the ladies' room. And what they doing? They come out and we had to break up the fight. Oh, she called me a nigger lover. I said, I'm glad you are. But all that ironed out. So I love being in the service. I really did. And I got to be a court reporter. They sent me to school to be a court reporter. My job was to take the boards and the court martials, but these boards were 3566 for homosexuals who got caught in the act of thing. Because by that time they were just, and you should hear some of the stories that those guys told as to how they became gay. One guy told how his father was upset with him because he liked to stay in the kitchen with his mom. Well, so what's wrong with that? He was learning to cook. Maybe he liked to cook. But he brought his co-workers, and they were all working on buildings, constructions, right? And he said, "You want to be a woman, huh?" And he let his co-workers have sex with his son to teach him what women have to go through. That was just one of the boards that I took. So you take enough of those, I started saying, what in the hell's going on here? How could our father do that? But to make a long story short, I learned a lot about being gay because I was in the closet and didn't know I was in the closet. I just didn't know what was going on. I'm learning. So when I went in the service, that's the first time I've had sex. I used to go to the house of prostitution. And so they taught me about sex. But before that, I had one little incident in Germany when it was so cold, we had to share our sleeping bags with each other. And this little boy said to me, Can I get funky with you? I said, what do you mean by that? Well, he showed me what he meant, and I liked it. We became good buddies. We became the best of friends. So that was my experience, my first experience with a homosexual act. And so let's see, after Germany, I came to England, no, Japan. In Japan, I really liked the Japanese women, but we was occupying Japan at that time. We weren't even using American money. We had houseboys to clean our barracks. We had houseboys to shine our shoes. It was a good life. The Japanese women were waitresses in the mess hall, and we were R&R for the guys in Korea, which came for rest and recuperation. And some of them would cry when they saw how well we were living. But they had to do that. So I learned that and almost got married in Japan. I really did. I had a good time with them. And then when I went to England, I enjoyed that 3 years. So I was 3 years in England, 3 years in Japan, 3 years in Germany. But it wasn't until I really got to the States and I went to Louisiana. Oh, here's what happened. They sent me to Louisiana. Couldn't stand it. My mother begged me not to drive my 59 Impala Chevrolet down to Louisiana. She said, they're not going to like you down there. They don't drive that car. I said, I'm driving my car to Louisiana. So I took it there. And the first gas station I drove in was in Louisiana. Nice car you got there, boy. Too bad we don't have any gas for it. Okay. I just went right on across the road to Amoco, got my gas, But in Louisiana, I just couldn't deal with the racism off base. I really stayed on base most of the time. But in Japan, I got to tell you a story that happened that I'm proud of myself and I'm proud of the guy I was up. By the time I had made staff sergeant, and this little airman came in, he was assigned over to my office in the legal office. And I was his supervisor. And he came to me, I asked him, I said, Kemp, I want you to do so and so and so and so. He said, I'm not going to do that. I said, what? You're not going to do that? Why not? I'm not used to taking orders from niggas. I said, oh, really? Okay. I say, come on, let this nigga show you how you're going to get used to taking orders from niggas. I took him into my office and sat there. But I told him, I said, look, man, I understand where you're coming from. You're away from home. I was away from home first time. And I know that's that word you probably use all the time. You can't use it here. I said, right now, I could put you up on chart, and I'm lying, I'm exaggerating. But I told him you could get 6 months in the stockade. And I said, and I'm going to be the one to have to write your mom and tell her you're in jail. And I'll make sure she knows that a nigga put you in there. I said, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes to make up your mind whether you're going to do what I asked you to do or you want me to write the letter. And I went on that. And he came out. He said, okay, Sergeant, I'm sorry. I said, okay. This never happened. Now, I really couldn't have put him in jail for 6 months. The only thing I could do was give him a letter of reprimand and an Article 15. He would have lost his stripe. But I didn't think that was necessary because I kind of knew how he felt. But to make a long story short, after 3 years and with 2 years, because I was on I had 1 year to go. So they gave me a going away party. I'm going back to the States. Well, we sitting there drinking beer and having a good time and saying farewell. I took my beer, that glass I had left, and drank it and sat it down in front of me. He said, have I grown or have I not? I said, you've grown quite a bit, and I give you credit for that. He said, let me give you my address, and you can write me. I said, oh, no, you haven't grown that much. I said, no, we'll let it go the way it is. But those are the kind of things that I had myself in the service. But it was not until I got to the States and I got discharged because I couldn't take the racism and the way I wouldn't re-enlist. They said, you going to throw away 13 years? I said, watch me. I know. Okay. Okay. So I just want to say one thing more, if they give me. It wasn't until I left the service and came to New York that I didn't know that I had homosexual tendencies. I really didn't, because I couldn't come out the closet. That closet was locked. But when I started meeting people and talk about how they hated gays, even when you go to church, the gays going to hell. I didn't believe that. One time I started having gay experiences. I went to a party one time that night, to a gay party. One of my choir members at church wanted me to go with him. I never saw so many gay men in my life. I mean, they were good-looking gay men. So I met them, and then they started telling me about this organization called SAGE. That's how I got to get to SAGE. So I went to SAGE as a volunteer. SAGE had a thing with AARP where you could get a stipend and do what you had to do. And they're going to pull me off the stage. That's why I should have kept to my notes. But just let me tell you one thing. If it wasn't for SAGE, I would not be as happy as I am now living in New York. I would still have been trying to be in that closet. But meeting the friendship and things of SAGE, and they gave me opportunities that I never thought I would have before. This was one of them. So I'm officially out of the closet and enjoying the homosexual lifestyle.
Okay, so it was 1968. A lot was going on. In the month of June, 700 men died in Vietnam. 40,000 were being called up. It was the anti-war movement. It was the civil rights movement. It was the sexual revolution. I was looking for a way out like a lot of people. I had no interest in this war whatsoever. I wanted to move to New York and be an artist. I actually made it down. I'm from Troy, New York, a number of generations from Troy, New York. I actually made it down here for a couple of months and actually landed a job. And before that dreaded letter came from the civil service, from the selective service. And I went up and, of course, passed my physical. And there were a few different ways you could get out of it. This wasn't World War II. We weren't attacked. There was a lot, but there was a strong feelings in my generation. There were strong feelings against the war. It was illegal and it was immoral. And so I'm thinking, how am I going to get out of it? Now, of course, I had never had a gay experience yet. I'd had heterosexual experiences, but never gay experience sexually. And I wasn't sure I could honestly check that box. And I wasn't sure I would check that box, because who are they to say I'm not good enough? So my ego wasn't going to let me check that box anyway. So, and of course, believe it or not, there were some doctors that would either write you a note saying that you were crazy, or that you had bone spurs. And that's a real thing. There was a bone spur doctor. So I decided, as much as I was against this war, I'm a working class guy, and my sister's husband was in Vietnam, and she was having their first child. We were very close. I had 7 brothers and sisters, but I was particularly close to this one sister. We're only a year and a half apart. I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't say I'm not going to go, but I didn't want to kill anybody. So I did go in as I enlisted in the Navy as a hospital corpsman, and not knowing that they could transfer me into the Marine Corps, which is eventually what happened. So by the time I was in and gone through my various trainings, boot camp, hospital corps school, short field medical service school with the Marine Corps, and then back to the hospital that I would really be doing my main training at, I was stationed in New York City in the summer of 1969. I arrived in my tight white sailor suit, and it really wasn't so bad. I was 20 years old. So it was in the sexual revolution was in the air, and even though there was a great divide for the people in the hospital. We lived in the hospital. It was on base, St. Albans Naval Hospital. It's now a veterans hospital. And we would work 12 days. We would go every 12 days. We were allowed off the base, we worked 12-hour shifts. The hospital was filled to capacity with the wounded. So there was a great divide between that, and it was the summer of Woodstock, so we didn't have we were very isolated from the rest of society. And I felt very isolated until I discovered Christopher Street. So it really was the gay world that sort of was my lifeline into some kind of sanity and stuff. And oddly enough, when I found Christopher Street, and I discovered, yes, I really am gay, and that I walked into one of the first bars, and I saw it all across the bar were corpsmen from the base. And I go, okay, this is really something. So it was a busy time. A lot of them were just back from Vietnam, and some of them were having orders to go to Vietnam. So then finally my number came up, and to be attached to the Marine Corps. For those of you who don't know, they actually take the Navy uniform away and give you a Marine Corps uniform, and you're assigned to a Marine Corps thing, and you're in Marine Corps barracks and the whole thing. So I got attached to the Marine Corps Air Squadron, and I went down there, and that was a whole different thing. That wasn't Christopher Street, that was a whole different thing. And then eventually, so then I discovered how you really had to hide being gay, whereas in the hospital duty it was we were careful enough, but I didn't have any big moral issues about being gay, and my family really didn't care. They had enough children. I already had 17 nieces and nephews. It was my parents weren't religious or strict or anything like that, so I didn't have that level of problems that some people had with being gay. It was an easy coming out for me, and so I survived all that. So I never got sent to Vietnam anyway. Instead, I got attached to a helicopter squadron and spent a year on an aircraft carrier as part of the flight crew doing airvac medic. So that year I spent mostly in the Mediterranean ports, and then I got to know sort of the international gay. And that was, I discovered, not a big difference really. And I discovered, this isn't just, American culture. This isn't just the way it is in progressive cities and stuff. There's gay everywhere. you know, and there's within the gay world, there's all these different versions and all these different ways. We're all very complicated people, and we have so many different ways we can live our lives. So it was at the end of the 4 years, you know, I got out. I really was a different person, and the world was different. And that was 4 years. The world changed a lot. And, you know, I always use the analogy. I was hoping the whole time, because I wanted to be an artist. And when I had come down to New York before getting my draft letter, I had already started at the Art Students League. I was already on my way to being an artist. And that all got interrupted. And so the minute I got out, I went right back to find my tribe. And I've been able to live my life as an artist, you know, and do it. So the military wasn't a bad experience for me. I saw homophobia. I saw the disasters of war, but it was, you know, I grew a lot, and I learned a lot from it too. So, and like I said, I saw the world, and I saw what it was like to be gay all over this world. So, in recent years, I've gotten very involved with SAGE and very involved with the veterans community. I teach some art at the Veterans Hospital, and it's I'm wrapping it up now. I'm in my 70s. Maybe I got 20 years left. So I'll hopefully, maybe 25 if I make it to your age. So it's you know, that's my story. So thank you.
I like mine a little higher. So good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. I couldn't see my clock before I stepped up. It's a pleasure to be here. For those of you who detect my Southern accent, you are absolutely spot on. I'm James Fitzgerald, and I grew up in a very small town in Tennessee, just south of Nashville, called Columbia. My family, you know, Southern Baptist, you know, conservative leaning in their values. And that really didn't mean that much to me up until the point in time in which I was 13 and my older brother was 16. And my older brother had come out to my family. And for me, it was the first time that I understood what terror meant, because I had never seen this part of my family come out. And I had so many connections with various members of my family, specifically with a lot of the females, like my mother and my grandmother. And to see this side of them as my brother's coming out, on top of learning many new terms like gay, and that's not a good thing. It doesn't just mean happy. I understood what faggot meant that night. So as I'm watching this in the moment, I'm learning truly, this is my destiny. This is what's going to happen to me when I tell my family my secret. So I had made a decision at that point in time, as I'm watching this shocking and traumatic scene take place, that I'll never come out. I'll never have that happen to me. I'll never be put in a position in which this kind of exposure, you know, comes upon me. So fast forward to the point, and I'm 19. We're at a time of war. The country's calling for service. And for me, ever since I was a Cub Scout, Boy Scout, I understood that the quickest way to gain a connection to the world was through service. So, you know, I wanted to answer the nation's call. I wanted to give all I could to the nation that had given me so much opportunity to have freedom of maneuver to do more than what generations prior had done. And the current ongoing practice in the military of don't ask, don't tell was already an applied practice in my life. I didn't want people to ask, and I certainly was not going to tell. So it wasn't a humongous change of pace whatsoever for me to join. I joined as an infantryman. I wanted to do the highest level of what I could of service. And, you know, being in combat arms, working with only men, it is not as fun as it sounds. It was the opposite of what I expected. Come from that small town, being birthed into an entirely new community, I was introduced to so many different aspects of this country, of this world, that I'd never envisioned. Meeting people from Montana, from Indiana, from New York. They were assholes in the beginning. But it was just like, wow, I'm getting all this kind of exposure to things that I never knew about in Columbia, Tennessee. So I truly felt like my service to my country was showing me so many different layers that I never would have gotten any other way. So I'm loving my military experience. Don't Ask, Don't Tell had successfully enabled me to justify pushing down a part of myself that I'd hidden away for so long. And I'd successfully done it. I was great at my job in the military, but I was also great at suppressing that part of myself, great at hating that part of myself, great at promoting the things that go against my values and go against who I am. So when the time came about that we were in Afghanistan, I was with 101st Airborne, very high profile unit, very fancy. You know, we're doing great stuff with the best equipment, with the best personnel on the planet. So November 13th, 2010, I'm leading the squad. We're in Afghanistan. We're in Kandahar, which at that point in time, the UN had established that portion of Afghanistan as the most dangerous place in the world. So, you know, that was something I put on my Tinder profile. It was absolutely great. But November 13th was the day that we were ambushed during a combat operation, and I happened to be leading that particular operation, and I was up front with my second in command, my best friend Josh, right beside me. And I was the first one to be struck during the ambush, and I was shot in my left thigh, which sent me flying off the side of the mountain. And I fell about 50 feet into a ravine where I fractured my knee and broke my femur in my right leg, and fractured my hip and broke my nose and some other stuff. So I was pretty messed up. And, you know, I genuinely thought that that was it. I was proud. I was proud of my service. I was proud of what I had accomplished in 24 years of life. And, you know, it was a point of honor to think that this is how, you know, other patriots feel when, you know, they think of, I hate that I only have one life to give to my country. So I understood that, you know, this is the check that I wrote to the country, and they're ready to cash it. And then I hear these bushes rustling, and then I get scared again, and I'm like, crap, you know, here we go. And it turns out to be Josh. And Josh was right next to me when I got shot and flew off the side of the mountain. He was the only person that saw where I had landed. And so, you know, after a little bit of searching, he was the one that found me. And as he comes up and starts assessing my injuries, I look up at him and notice that he's shot as well, but he's shot in the face. And his face is leaking blood. And like we, you know, both acknowledged at this moment, it's like, hey, this is going to be it. It's like, we're going to be sharing these last moments together. You know, we're, you know, doing the romantic comedy of, oh, I'm so glad it's with you. And, oh my goodness, you know, you're wonderful. Oh no, you're wonderful. But we both acknowledged that, you know, we respected each other. We loved each other. And, you know, these were the moments that, you know, were going to be our last. Thankfully, others found us and, you know, got us to safety. But I have to point out the fact that during those last moments, the thought came across my head, should I tell my best friend? Should I tell my brother in arms who I am? We're about to die. And then that same fear that I felt as 13, I felt at 24. My God, the new family that had accepted and loved me and cared for me for so long, are they going to reject me at this point in time when I come out? Is my best friend, is my brother going to reject me? Should I take this risk? And I chickened out, and I didn't say a word. I didn't say a thing. So a couple of years passed, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed. I'm in an entirely new base. You know, everyone's, oh, James, you did great, blah, 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 blah. I'm teaching. Yet again, I don't say a word. And now it's authorized for me to tell all about myself, and I choose not to, in fear of losing my family again and again. So this theme of failure internally is having to be pushed down alongside of this individual that I have hidden away from the world for so long. And it was hidden behind the uniform, and now that the uniform was gone after I was medically retired in 2014, I moved to New York. I had another secret. I had fallen in love. I had moved in with a man that lived in Manhattan. And the time came to, tell my family about the other person that I was living with, the man that I loved, this new life that I was beginning to live. And I kept making these trips back to Colombia with the full intent to tell them. It's like, oh, and I also have this wonderful guy I want you to meet. And each and every single time I failed. And I remember one conversation during my last trip, and it was about one of my cousins who had also came out. And my uncle and aunt didn't have the best response, and he tried to take his life. And he had overdosed on his medication, and he ended up in the hospital. And they were still relentless in their attacks. They just took it to new levels. And I'm just, yet again, watching in silence, not saying a word as this is going on. Then it dawns on me. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who I am, what I do. They're never going to accept me. This family is not ever going to accept this part of myself. And, it came to pass that Time magazine reached out to me to say, hey, we're doing a Veterans Day issue. We've heard about your story. We'd love to feature you. And I'm like, oh, perfect. That's great. So, I scheduled this interview during this last visit to, Colombia to, tell the world, to tell my family. And me and my grandmother were gardening, and I'm explaining to her what Time magazine is. And, it's like, yeah, I'm sure you can get it in Colombia. Yeah, whatever. And, we're, having this, normal moment between us to where we're doing this garden work and we're connecting. And I tell her, it's like, hey, I got to go make this call. And she's like, yeah, go do your thing. And before I hop on the call, I call my boyfriend. It's just like, oh my God, should I explain you? Should I, bring you up? And he's like, it's completely up to you. It's your choice. Trust your gut. And I remember sitting in the backyard of my grandmother's home as I'm, having this interview with this Time magazine reporter. And it gets to the point of love. She's like, so do you feel like the love for your country has been justified? Do you feel like, you're happy with what's going on? It's like, I feel happy that I have someone that loves and cares for me. She's like, oh, who is that? And it's like, it's my boyfriend. Oh, and it was just like this weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and I couldn't shut up about, my boyfriend and guys, and oh yeah, and it's like, oh. But then, the fear came back, and it's like, crap, now that this is gonna happen, it's inevitable. And, I still kind of chickened out because I got on the plane, came back to New York, and I felt relieved. But I knew that the magazine was eventually gonna hit stands. They'll be able to read it at their leisure. They could find it at fine bookstores around the country. So it's like, oh, they'll definitely come across it. And so I just waited. I remember sitting in Morningside Park in the middle of the night, just under this street light, waiting for the phone calls to come rolling in. And it was call after call. They all followed the same thing. Hey, we read the article. It's great, but there's some misprints in there. It says you have a boyfriend, and I think that was wrong. So you need to call them whenever you can. And also, what is this coming out? What were you coming out? Like, what is that? Where were you at? And it was like, this is weird. But I explained it, and I just remember just the feeling of how similar it was to that night when I was 13, watching all my family just converge on my brother and question and just like break him down. And then to fast forward to my experience, it's like I still got it. They still were able to, converge on me, but I got to do it on my own terms. I got to do it with pride. I got to do it with confidence in myself. I got to do it being who I am in a space that accepted me for who I am. So, New York is my home. New York has been the first place that I've been able to be myself in. This is the first place that's accepted me for who I am. And so to have that full circle, service to the country, and then to return and be in New York City, it was a true honor. And to take all my experience, take all my knowledge, take all my skills to the current place that I work, which is Alley 4A Center, which is the country's largest LGBTQ youth shelter, and step inside of those walls and provide an example to let them know that, it may be rough sometimes, but it's worth it. And courage isn't having fear or being in a state where fear doesn't touch you. It's having that fear and still moving forward, and still being able to have pride and accept yourself. Sometimes that's the most courageous act we can always do. Thank you.